Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times says the director of this movie attacks film noir with three of his most cherished tools: whimsy, spontaneity, and narrative perversity. Vincent Candy of the New York Times says that he attempts the impossible and pulls it off. And Letterboxd user Fran Hoffner says, "I want Elliot Gould to breathe on my face." On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we determine the fate of The Long Goodbye.
Sequel. Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be?
It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. It's Ruined Childhoods time. Hi, John.
Hey, Dan. How you doing?
Why, on the edge of sanity as I sound.
Yeah, that's... Okay, before we recorded, there's a little bit of off-mic chatter about... okay, we are living in coronavirus times. You know, everybody's going a little bit hot right now, especially when you have little kids. So things can get a little tricky when you're in a home with the same people 24/7 without
And one of
any
them is
sanity
6.
breaks. And one of them is 6. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, no. And I totally wasn't going to bring any of the domestic drama up, but of course, as I
Speaking of domestic drama, The Long Goodbye. Sorry, that came way too soon.
And perhaps not what I would consider domestic drama. The ice storm, on the other hand.
Why wouldn't it be domestic drama?
Oh yeah. I don't know if it's the genre. There is domestic drama in it.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
I don't mean genre-wise.
Okay. Got it.
Things
Anyway.
are amiss in Malibu. We'll come back to that.
As they are in Seattle. Thankfully, not nearly as amiss as they are in Malibu. But so no, I heard my voice as I was saying, because look, when John and I do this, there are no second takes. This is it. You're hearing it as we're doing it. And I heard my voice and I was like, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, you are trying so hard to counterbalance the madness
right.
that is in your mind right now.
Okay, well then how about this? Let's do a little diversion and maybe that'll help put your mind at ease. So you just mentioned that we don't do second takes. And on the note of second takes, I want to do a one more thing for Seconds 2 episodes ago. So,
okay.
And this is kind of a one more thing from your one more thing from the last episode, in which you were talking about Alex Garland as being a really great option for a director, an auteur to bring Seconds back. And I don't think that I really gave that response the appreciation that it deserves. And I don't know if I was just like thinking of what I was going to be talking about next, but like you said it and I just moved to the next thing, and I want to just come back to it because it is a great suggestion. And I want to acknowledge.
Thank you, John.
Of course. Because
I thought nothing of it, but
I was just thinking about it more and more, and you're totally right. I mean, Alex Garland, for anybody, Alex Garland's been around for quite a while. Wrote 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
And I think was even active before then too, but directed Ex Machina and Annihilation. And recently, as you mentioned on the last episode, is involved with Devs. And yeah, for somebody to take the reins on something like the movie Seconds, a 2020, as we are recording this in 2020, a modern day approach to it would be very appropriate for Alex Garland. Just thinking about, you know, the worlds that Alex Garland creates, the structures, just the visual landscapes, I think really could give a lot of weight to a second's second. Anyway.
Oh, just a few seconds for a second take on seconds.
Yeah. I do have a few more things about Major League.
Oh, awesome. Go ahead.
Okay, this first one, Dan, I did tell you over text, but to go back to something that we had talked about on the last episode, Hot Topic first opened its doors 6 months after the release of Major League. So in case anybody was wondering wanting a follow-up on that, the store Hot Topic did not exist at the release of Major League, but did 6 months later. So Major League 2, yes.
And it's funny, John, because you mentioned that, and I was listened to the episode, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh shit, did I mean to say Spencer's? And it's more appropriate to Hot Topic. But
Hot Topic, yeah. Spencer's Gifts might have been, is more likely to have been around in 89.
Because I felt like I had a moment when we were having that conversation, and I had I think the visual in my head was Spencer's, but the item is much more appropriate to Hot Topic.
So you were picturing this item next to like a mug, making a joke about someone being over the hill, and then also a fart machine.
Yeah. There's a fart machine. Wine. There's a big poster of. Oh, you know what's in there? The poster I used to have in my room with "This is the brain on drugs" and the different eggs. Right there you go. It's right in there. There's a over the top movie poster. I don't.
Yeah. So speaking about things that opened after Major League, one thing that closed after Major League was the Corvette Museum in Cooperstown, New York that we talked about. I looked it up. It no longer is there. There is a Corvette Museum somewhere else, but I was reading some like reviews from the Corvette Museum, and not as nice as I remember it being. Everyone's like, the cars there are like dusty and weird. And that disappeared years ago. So
the luster has long worn off the Corvette Museum.
Yeah, it didn't get such a nice patina as one might imagine. So that's where we are with Major League. Did you have anything that you wanted to add to Major League? I know that those aren't things that have anything to do with what we talk about on this podcast, which is movie remakes, reboots, sequels.
No, other than I can't. It's one of those things that I can't think about it without laughing. The Mr. Belvedere story.
I'm telling you.
The song that you put at the end.
Well, okay. There were so many different. So, talked about this in the last episode.
Worth repeating.
If you get fed up listening to an episode of our show, at least skip to the very end, because I like to put in some sort of song or something that relates to the movie that we talk about. And on the last episode, as we're talking about Major League and Cleveland, it's kind of like a character in the movie, you know? Anyway, that's just making fun of people who say that. So Cleveland is definitely a big part of it. So I love the 30 Rock song about fleeing to the Cleve and how like glamorous and perfect Cleveland is.
Right.
I mean, clearly you could do Cleveland Rocks. You could do
I meant the Mr. Belvedere's. There was the Mr. Belvedere's Balls song.
Yeah. So I was just searching YouTube to find out if there was anything about Mr. Belvedere sitting on his balls so I could send it to you. And I found that song and I was like, oh, well, hello. This is perfect.
I searched for the same thing, and the closest thing I could find was Artie Lang and Norm Macdonald telling like Bob Uecker stories.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
which fun. Was really fun. Well, because I guess that's how the story got out, was Bob Uecker told. I don't know. He's like Norm Macdonald.
I want to say I first heard it because of the comedian Doug Benson, who at the time, his roommate was like on Mr. Belvedere, like a regular on Mr. Belvedere. And it was a firsthand story being told to him. So I guess you could just say widely confirmed.
Yes. Well, one would imagine they both would have been there. Yeah. Wow. I'm just imagining. And by the way, for those of you, for anyone who isn't quite familiar with Mr. Belvedere, or the actor Christopher Hewitt, if you've seen the original film version of The Producers, well, it was the Producers, 1968, right. Mel Brooks. Christopher Hewitt played the director, the drag queen director.
That's such a wild movie.
Of Springtime for Hitler.
I wonder if beyond what we're doing right now, we'll ever really talk about certain Mel Brooks movies. And I think that might be more of a personal thing, just because, like we say, we are poking fun at people who say that, like, oh, that'll ruin my childhood. But it's like, a Mel Brooks one, like that would be a tough one for me.
Well, but also, like, I would suggest that most Mel Brooks movies, and I say most because To Be or Not to Be is a remake.
Well, yeah, that's fair.
But most of his films
no one's saying To Be or Not to Be as like, oh, you know what Mel Brooks movies I love? To Be or Not to, like, that's not
right. No, it's never right. No, but I can't imagine someone other than Mel Brooks making, doing, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to remake Robin Hood Men in Tights? That's why they're all going to Broadway, because there's nothing else you can do with them.
Yeah.
That's what, like, The Producers, Young Frankenstein. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Robin Hood Men in Tights ended up on Broadway. Men in
Tights.
Like, it's already got like a couple of musical numbers. So
that's right.
You throw in some more. And I mean, The Producers was very successful as a musical, as was Young Frankenstein. And, I'm surprised Blazing Saddles, the musical, hasn't happened.
Sure.
I mean, I think that might be my favorite Mel Brooks movie.
I mean, if we're talking favorite Mel Brooks movies, it would be hard for me to say, I think that right at the top would have to be Young Frankenstein and Spaceballs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that if I were a few years older, it might be a little different. But I think that Spaceballs being such a big presence in my childhood really put its place in my heart early on.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. And Spaceballs, honestly, is probably at my number 2 for overall favorite, because with a lot of Mel Brooks movies, I find that I really love scenes. Like, there are parts of History of the World Part 1 that are funnier than anything in any other Mel Brooks movie. But that movie, some segments tend to drag, and we'll cut this one short. I don't want this segment to drag. But Blazing Saddles, for me, is the one that I am constantly laughing through Blazing Saddles. And I am constantly the performances in it are just so incredible, from Madeline Kahn and Harvey Korman, of course, Gene Wilder, Cleavon Little, all of the townspeople, John Hillerman.
It's hilarious. It's a great movie.
But yeah, I don't know if we'll ever end up focusing on anything Mel Brooks in an episode. And quite honest, don't. Oh yeah, The Producers, Christopher Hewitt, Mr. Belvedere.
Yes, that's where this came from.
Yeah, sorry, I got to paraphrase, or to quote Frozen 2, Lost in the Woods.
Oh, yeah.
There.
Did you also watch that in the past few days?
No, I don't know. Chloe, my 6-year-old, she, we saw Frozen 2. She's like, yeah, it was okay. She's like, it's not great. Let's listen to the music all the time. But that's more, she's more of like a highlights. Like, she's going to be the type of kid. She's going to be even the type of adult who gets mostly greatest hits albums. Although, who's getting albums anymore? What are we doing?
She's just going to select the essentials playlist on Spotify or Apple Music.
Yeah. She's just going to the, best of 50 best of whatever. So anyway, speaking of music. Speaking of music and songs that you may or may not use for the episode, I wonder what you might use for The Long Goodbye. Is there a song that pops up in that movie?
You know, you might be surprised. I'm going to try my hardest to be clever with it. But yeah, I mean, what Dan is joking about is that there really is one song and it's just kind of done in different variations throughout the movie.
It's such an interesting choice, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I didn't know, John, if you had anything else to add, but I figured...
Oh, no, we can definitely get into The Long Goodbye. If you're
say
ready.
Hello to The Long Goodbye.
Okay.
Such an interesting movie.
It's really fascinating. It was my first time seeing it. I think I saw that it had come on Netflix and I was like, I've been wanting to watch it. I don't know. I feel like there's a certain part of me that's been missing out on certain Altman movies, Elliot Gould history, that I feel like I need to just fill those gaps in a little bit. Seriously.
I know. No, I'm with you, John. In fact, it's funny. I want to say 2 summers ago, I kind of tried to do a little like Robert Altman catch up. Like I'd never seen all of Nashville. So I just like,
right. I remember talking with you during that. Yeah.
It's like never streaming on anything. So I just like bought it and watched it because I'm like, I think I'm going to love this movie and I'm going to want to see it again, which, I did. But McCabe and Mrs. Miller was one of them that I took another look at took a look at for the first time. And The Long Goodbye was kind of on that list, but didn't quite make it. And among the Robert Altman films that I hadn't still seen, it was probably at the top of my to-do list.
Well, I don't know. I feel like nowadays when people see Elliot Gould in things, it's like the quirky, nebbishy Jewish guy.
It's his character in Ocean's 11.
Right. Totally. Which he's great in, but he has
nobody thinks sex symbol.
Right. Right. And even his character, Philip Marlowe in The Long Goodbye, would not be a conventional sex symbol, but it's the leading role and he's got this like crazy charm to him that's you just can't stop watching him. Even though he is just this like, I don't know, brooding, tired looking guy.
Well, John, the 70s were a great time to be a character actor. By the way, speaking of character actors, we got to pour one out for Brian Dennehy.
Oh my God.
Right now.
I know that when we did our Cocoon episode, I made a comment about how in my mind, I felt like he had passed away. And I think that it was just because of Tommy Boy that put that in my head that Brian Dennehy is no longer with us. But he was up until the other day. And when I saw that news, I was just like, no, like I just found out you were still alive recently and now taken. But Brian Dennehy, such an amazing talent and, not a coronavirus related death.
No,
and
no.
Super sad news.
But anyway, speaking of, and I always think of Brian Dennehy in terms of the Patton Oswalt story from one of his albums where he talks about, Brian Dennehy kind of comforting him about character actors being able to eat all the good food at a buffet. Oh, yeah.
Right, because Brian Dennehy played his Papa Rat.
Yeah, Papa Rat in Ratatouille. Yeah. So have you seen that recently, John?
I have, as a matter of fact.
So Brian Dennehy abounds.
I didn't have the heart to tell my daughter, like, by the way, Remy's dad, the guy who did his voice, she wouldn't understand.
Maggie, let me tell you about Brian Dennehy. No, but character actors in the 1970s, you could be a character actor and be a sex symbol. Dustin Hoffman.
Right. Yeah.
Look, I mean, if you look at the number of actors who came up in the 70s who were not traditional, sex, Al Pacino.
Yeah.
Like these were not traditional sex symbols. And yet because of this charisma, Gene Hackman, another one, because of this, they all looked in their early 40s for a long time. And but it's that charisma, and I think it was like this toughness, and that they represented that, you know, kind of like the renegade spirit of the filmmaking in that era.
Sure. Yeah.
It was
Well,
sexy.
okay, not going to launch into a whole huge thing about how that all has changed and where things are now, but you know, I know that a lot of decisions about casting for like TV shows and stuff are made based on like social media followship, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs, but it's, you know, a money-making plan. And you need to be hiring people who are generating buzz online. And hey, 1973, when this came out, that wasn't even close to being a thing. It, you know,
but if it was, Elliot Gould would have had so many followers.
Sure, you would hope so.
I would hope
no,
so.
But you know, Robert Altman had the opportunity to direct this movie. He had worked with Elliot Gould on MASH, and Elliot Gould did not have a good reputation at this point. He kind of had a bit of a lull. People didn't like working with him, but Altman liked him and brought him back.
I think it might have had something to do. I remember hearing a story about how, like, I feel like with MASH, there was like some shit talking about MASH or something that like Donald Sutherland was doing on press tours, but Elliot Gould was kind of standing up for the film.
Mm.
So
that's another thing. So I went down a few wormholes not too long ago about like old like Dick Cavett interviews and things like that. And people used to talk a lot of shit about like stuff on their press tours. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, because they get
nowadays
hammered.
everyone's tiptoeing around things and they have to spin it. They have their PR person that's like, no. You got to say this. You got to say this. You got to say this. But then it was just like Donald Sutherland running his mouth.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, because like, I mean, you know, it was cool to break the rules.
Well, also it's like if you made a TV appearance at the time, it happened and then it was done.
Yeah. True.
You miss it.
But yeah, no.
You miss it.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, I don't know, but you know, a lot of those guys were totally sloshed on those shows.
Oh my God, totally. So I'm going to launch into a synopsis of The Long Goodbye, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the Philip Marlowe character, like where he comes from. We'll talk about the movie itself, the legacy of Philip Marlowe, because it is very rich and pretty fascinating. The more I dug into it, the more I wanted to just learn more and more and more. So, The Long Goodbye. Elliot, the Jewish Clydesdale Gould, stars as Philip Marlowe, a brooding private eye who loves two things more than justice, and that's his tie and his cat. We meet Marlowe while he's on an endless quest for the bougie cat food his feline friend can't live without. Having failed in that conquest, he's tasked with a personal favor. His best bud, Terry Lennox, just got into a big fight with his wife and needs a ride to Mexico, and he needs it fast. That all seems good and fine until Marlowe gets back to LA and finds out that Lennox is wanted for murdering his wife, and Marlowe gets arrested for conspiring with Lennox, seeing as how he acted as his getaway driver. After Lennox turns up dead, Marlowe is let out of jail and manages to line up a PI gig. Eileen Wade, the wife of famous writer Roger Wade, needs Marlowe to track down her alcoholic husband. The Wades and the Lennoxes live in the same Malibu community, so Eileen knew that Marlowe was the man for the job after reading about him in the paper. This connection gets Marlowe's gears turning and begins to form new theories about the deceased Sylvia Lennox. Complications grow when Marlowe is confronted by mobster Marty Augustine and his goons when it's discovered that Terry vanished with over $300,000 of Augustine's money, and they think Marlowe knows where it is. With a few trips to Mexico, the camaraderie of his topless neighbors, and his lucky tie, Marlowe puts the pieces together and brings justice to Los Angeles and the quiet Malibu community that was, for a brief period of time, fraught with controversy. So that's just my brief synopsis. As always, there's so much more that happens. And And this is a complicated story because there's a lot of deception. There's, a lot of pieces in place. Dan, how much do you want me to talk about the ending of this movie? Because something that I find fascinating about the ending of this movie is that the theatrical trailer for this pretty much gives everything away. Like the poster even gives some things away. I don't know.
I mean, I didn't watch the theatrical trailer, and the poster that I saw just has him walking in front of the ocean.
Oh, okay. Well, then I saw a different one. The trailer, which trailers at the time were very, very different, but
yes,
they
were better.
It pretty much shows in almost its entirety Marlow chasing after Eileen as she's driving away, when she's in the car and he's chasing her. And it's like,
yeah,
I get that when you're cutting a trailer, you want to get the most exciting looking things. And Philip Marlowe is not a man of action in the sense that he is not the most active person. And that is a very active scene where he's running. He's kind of more of a sloshy lumbering type.
Well, and we see what happens when he tries to do that.
Well, doesn't end up.
It doesn't end well. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that's why. I mean, yes, we can talk about the ending, and it. I don't know if it doesn't sound like the trailer kind of gives. There was something that I found very surprising and shocking about the ending.
What's that? Okay. I'll just say. So he goes to Mexico and pays off a few of the people that had originally told him that Lennox had killed himself, and the coroner confirmed it. They faked his death, and Lennox was just kind of hidden away in a bungalow. He did kill his wife, and he was with Eileen. So. Yeah. And there was a whole thing going on, this whole deception where Eileen essentially told Marlowe that her husband, Roger, who kills himself by walking into the ocean, that he was having an affair with Sylvia Lennox and that she thinks that he killed her. So that was just a way to kind of...
It was a red herring.
Push him in the direction... Yeah, the red herring, yeah. So, okay, so Dan, what were you going to say?
When Marlowe just shoots Lennox...
Right.
Throughout watching this movie, and I felt that it's a very atypical Altman film.
Okay.
So, and even though this was early on in his career, I felt that it was, of all the films I've seen of his, it was the most focused on one central character, Marlowe.
Yeah.
And that's whereas true. You have, it's got the DNA of Altman. It's got his camera movements.
It's always moving.
Yeah, the camera is always moving. And when you're seeing, you're hearing one conversation, but you're seeing another one that's taking place, but not really with the overlapping dialogue.
I feel like, one of Altman's big trademarks is people talking over each other. It feels very real, like you're actually looking at of something that's going on. It doesn't feel like it's a movie as much because there's chaos.
Yeah. It's interesting in terms of how Altman approaches it. And I just kept wondering, I was like, Altman. And I watched the great documentary about Robert Altman, and it didn't focus too much on The Long Goodbye, but I kept thinking, he's got to have a purpose. There's got to be a reason why he's taking a early 1950s detective story and moving it to early 1970s Los Angeles, and throwing in the things like the neighbors who do yoga and are constantly topless. I feel like he's saying something in it. He's saying something, maybe it's about Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about film. Maybe it's because you're watching it the whole time. And especially if you're watching it in 1973, you're you've probably seen, The Big Sleep or Farewell, My Lovely, and, things like The Maltese Falcon. And you have an expectation of that genre. Right. And now all of a sudden it's like, I'm being told this is Philip Marlowe, and this is a Philip Marlowe story that I'm familiar with, but that's not like Humphrey Bogart. Who played him? Humphrey Bogart?
Well, so there have been a lot of Philip Marlowe TV shows, movies, made-for-TV movies. Yes, Bogart played him in The Big Sleep, and we have Robert Montgomery, George Montgomery, James Garner, Robert Mitchum. Powers Booth was Marlowe in the HBO TV series. Danny Glover played Philip Marlowe. James Caan was Marlowe in an HBO movie. So there's so many more.
Yeah.
But yes, I think Bogart is the one that most people would probably think of.
Right. And especially because I think the Mitchum ones were, I forget when those actually might have been before The Long Goodbye, but he's by casting Elliot Gould.
Farewell, My Lovely was 75.
Oh, okay. So right after.
Right. So right after. And then there was the Big Sleep in 78.
Okay. All right. So they did. I wasn't sure if those were in the 50s or this. And so, okay. So those were after. So, but Elliot Gould stands out. So the casting of Elliot Gould, the setting in 1970s Los Angeles, the use like Marty. I mean, I have not read the novel, but Marty Augustine does not seem like a character from a 1951 mystery novel. Oh, by the way, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
Arnold.
I mean, aside
he
from
pops up in this.
Pumping Iron, is that maybe his first on-screen performance?
I
don't even know what Pumping Iron was, but Arnold is one of his henchmen who has no lines. He's just the muscle, and you can't take your eyes off of him, especially knowing that it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're just like, oh my God, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, but like not as a mega huge celebrity, which is a fun thing to watch.
Just chilling. Hercules in New York was before this.
Oh, really?
Was 1970. Yeah, but this was his second movie, and this was before, because he did Stay Hungry after this, which I think he got a Golden Globe nomination for Stay Hungry.
Oh yeah,
for best newcomer, something like that. But anyway, yeah. So it was cool seeing Arnold. But like I'm saying, what's Altman up to here? Oh, and question for you: who is Roger Wade supposed to be? Because I look at him, I see Hemingway.
Yeah, I was thinking he is very Hemingway-y.
I'm wondering if that's how he was written originally in the novel. That's what I'm wondering, if it was kind of like a call out at Hemingway, or
could be. So one thing I want to do is just read a quick little synopsis of the book, The Long Goodbye, because one thing that people didn't love about the film is that it does stray wildly from the source material. And this is from a synopsis from The Guardian. A drinking buddy of Marlowe's, Terry Lennox, heads off to Mexico, leaving behind his dead wife, Sylvia, and then apparently commits suicide. While attempting to rebut police assumptions that Lennox murdered Sylvia, Marlowe is hired by Eileen Wade to locate her alcoholic novelist husband, Roger Wade. But Roger is soon found dead, and shortly afterwards, Eileen turns up dead too. She confesses in a note to the murder of Sylvia Lennox, out of fury over Sylvia's affair with her husband, and the subsequent murder of Roger. Marlowe discovers that Eileen was also married to Terry Lennox before the war. Though the case is over, Lennox rematerializes in Marlowe's office, his appearance surgically remodeled. He's been secondsed.
Ooh,
interesting.
Wow. No kidding.
The part about him being secondsed was not in the Guardian synopsis, just in case anyone's wondering.
in the middle of it, ooh, he's been secondsed.
Ooh, he's been secondsed. You all know what that means, right?
Yes.
So,
it's like John Frankenheimer bursts into the room. You've been secondsed.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and it's it seems like Altman made the right decisions to make it a more compelling story, a more layered story. I mean, I think that it's interesting, and also
Oh,
it helps it make more sense to be taking place in the 70s. I don't know. It just works a little bit better that way. I think also it's like when people are making adaptations now from material that's from a different era, they're trying to say, like, I mean, like you're saying, like people are trying to say something different or trying to engage in a more current audience. And I think that probably has something to do with it too. I mean, I don't think that this movie was a huge box office success, but I think that there had to have been some sort of impetus to generate, I don't know, a younger audience for a noir film, because of course in like the 40s and 50s that was a big thing, but
mhm.
it can get a little tiresome if you're doing the same thing over and over again in the same era.
Right.
Similarly also to, like, you know, go 10 years into the future with like a noir film like Blade Runner, where you're
Uh,
kicking it into the future.
yeah, yeah. Go 25 to a very similar movie to this, The Big Lebowski, which I
The
feel The
Big
Big
Lebowski.
Lebowski. After I watched this, I was like, now I see where they got a lot of inspiration for The Big
Yeah, and I
Lebowski.
did read that they were inspired by Gould's performance as Marlow for the dude.
It's very, I mean, he wakes up and it's kind of a trope of the detective genre.
Yeah.
It's like the beginning of The Last Boy Scout. He wakes up in his car and that, and then here Elliot Gould just wakes up in his like shithole apartment and, doesn't have cat food. And he's just, yeah, like you said, he's wandering around looking for cat food.
By the way, speaking of the cat food, I just want to call out the character, the grocery store clerk, who's just like, cat food's cat food, man. Who gives a shit? And then he runs into him later in jail.
Yes.
And he's like, hey, did you get your cat food? That was just such a nice moment. That felt so good. Just, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if that is supposed to like make some sort of statement, or if it's just a human moment, like a very real kind of like, coincidences can happen and mean nothing in movies too. And it's just like a fun moment where you make a connection. Like it just draws you into Marlowe's character, where like you get excited that he is excited that he recognizes some guy and they have this funny interaction.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because first of all, the people in the grocery store know him.
Right.
They seem to be like, Marlowe doesn't seem to have a lot of connections. Even his relationship with Lennox isn't like, they don't hang out all the time, but it's like he doesn't seem to really have friends. And
no, he's tight with his neighbors. You know, the topless yoga enthusiasts, whatever is going on with them. Very respectful of them, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves his cat. He's very concerned about his cat who has gone missing after the cat doesn't get the bougie cat food that they love. He has, what do you think the deal was with his tie? He always wanted to make sure that his tie was on. At the beginning of the movie, he puts it on. What do you suppose the connection is with that?
Honestly, I think it has a lot to do with your generational differences. You're taking a genre. You are taking a character that is like beloved of the more conservative generation, the older generation, your greatest generation, pre-boomers. And then you have
preemies.
Well, yeah, because you have your boomers who are essentially, your audience, your, 20 to 30-year-olds, your audience for this film in the early 70s, who at this point, are, they're the hippies. It's the, counterculture.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of what Altman is trying to do by kind of bridging that gap and saying like, hey, look, this character, this Philip Marlowe, like Humphrey Bogart, who you all like
More like Humphrey Bogart. He's a mess.
Yeah. But it's like, hey, honestly, if this, like, in real life, this guy would be like you. This guy would be like that neighbor that lives over there in that other apartment. He's got a cat and he's kind of a slob, but he's chill.
He can light a match on anything.
Oh, yes. He lights a match on the glass when he walks into the grocery store.
How great is that?
That was amazing.
Yeah, he's this chain smoker.
Oh, yeah.
Roger calls him the Marlboro Man.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, man. And Sterling Hayden. Wow.
Ooh, yes.
And you talk about taking someone who's, I would say probably more affiliated with that older generation. Who, by the way, Sterling Hayden, as I read in the IMDb trivia, was apparently so drunk and high throughout the filming of this that he just like made up his lines.
I think so.
Makes a lot of sense when you watch it. I think the casting has so much to do with what Altman is trying to do or trying to say with this movie. I'm not 100% sure what exactly that is, but everything feels very intentional.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that we haven't talked about yet is, Wade is this alcoholic. Marlow finds him at this rehab facility where he is kind of in an abusive relationship with Dr. Veringer, the
Henry Gibson,
who has been on my mind a lot lately because we've been watching a lot of Charlotte's Web in my house. So it's funny because who's Wilbur? So I hear his voice as Wilbur, and then I'm watching this movie and he's like slapping Roger Wade in front of all of his friends on the beach, trying to get his money.
Yeah, right. And he's there, right? So that the wife has the alibi, or that.
Yes.
I always find the first time I watch a mystery, and this was what also reminded me of The Big Lebowski. So I remember watching The Big Lebowski and just feeling like, I don't know what the hell just happened. I loved it, but I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was also his presence there was also to get Wade to like get so drunk that maybe he does kill him. So I don't know, like, if she wanted him to get pushed over the edge.
Oh, when he shows up at the party, when the doctor shows up at the party.
Were you talking about at the rehab facility?
Oh, I just meant why he was at the rehab facility.
Yeah. So he was there. Well, that's a good question, because was it her idea for him to be there? Because
they were paying the doctors to say that he had been there
for an alibi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
If I remember correctly.
It's very layered, as an Altman movie tends to be.
Right, but I mean, I remember by the end of the movie, I'm having a little trouble recalling it right now, and I didn't really take notes as much on the plot, but I feel like it made sense. It like kind of was all tied up nicely. Like I felt at the end that I was like, okay, I understand now.
Well, the one thing that I just haven't taken the time for myself to piece together mentally. So at the end, we talked about Eileen driving away from the building, and that building is where Marty Augustine has his operation, where the money that was owed to him from Lennox just magically appears as he's trying to intimidate Marlow. And then the money appears and he's like, all right, you are free to leave. And then that's when Marlow sees her going. So it's like, why did she give that money back? That's one thing I didn't understand. Because she could have just gone down to Mexico and disappeared and been with Lennox.
Right.
Then just with a bunch of money.
I would need to watch it again. Oh, by the way, how great is Mark Rydell as Marty Augustine?
Oh my God, he's so good. He's so good. He performs that role just really, really well. Like you believe that he's this just like little crime boss.
And he's like, crazy.
Yeah, when they all just like strip down, it's so good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because it's like he's like calling the bluff, you know?
Yeah.
I think he went on to be like more of a director.
Oh yeah?
Mark Rydell. Yeah, I want to say he directed On Golden Pond. He directed On Golden Pond. He directed The Rose. He directed For the Boys, also with Bette Midler.
For the Boys.
And the aforementioned James Caan.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Dan, before we move on to talking about the future of The Long Goodbye, well, I guess I should probably talk about, there was a Long Goodbye episodic remake that was it in China? I don't remember exactly which country of origin it is, but it is something that is, I think, set in the 50s. Here's a little synopsis on IMDb. This is from 2014. In this unauthorized adaptation of the novel The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler, set in Tokyo during the 50s, Tamatsu is suspected of murdering his actress wife, Shizuka Harada. He flees to Taiwan and commits suicide. Okay, so it's just names are changed and things are adapted to fit the that culture. So that's the only thing. I know that there was also some other adaptations of the book that have been on like television serials, but nothing that, I think there was a show called Climax that did a version of it. But yeah, I don't know. There really hasn't been much aside from this 2014 TV miniseries. I know that I read somewhere, it might have been the IMDb trivia, that Elliot Gould had written a concept for a new Philip Marlowe story, which is interesting. And I'd love to talk to you about this quite a bit, but the Philip Marlowe character, it is a very specific Raymond Chandler character. And I believe that and there have only been like maybe 7 of these like pulpy novels that star this character or that feature this character, maybe some short stories. And I think that the last one was written partially and then finished by somebody else. That one was also adapted into a film. But like, what would you think about, I don't know, re-energizing a character that somebody else had built up for such a long time? Like, at one point, does like a character become open to new people developing new stories for that character?
Like a James Bond.
Like a James Bond, yes. I think that's the only example I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are others in other ways. Like if you think about, I mean, this is not at all the same level of example, but just to bring up a recent example, how, Major League 3 was not at all written by the writer of Major League 1 or 2. So it was some, sure. I understand what you're saying. It's not the same, but so I was thinking about it, and I think a lot would depend on the Chandler estate, same author Raymond Chandler, but I don't see why you couldn't have new Philip Marlowe stories as long as they were faithful to your. Now, what's the impetus of that?
Well,
I mean, I think with
James, to what exactly?
Well, I would say faithful to the history of the character. No, I mean, I don't know if you're going to like
core principles, because I think that Elliot Gould really strays kind of far from like Bogart's representation.
I think Altman's film in the world of Philip Marlowe is an outlier. If I was doing, because what are you going to like? What are you going to do? Like Seth Rogen as Philip Marlowe, and then because like no one other than Altman is Altman, and so you're not going to remake an and Altman, you're not gonna remake The Player. It's like we were talking about with Mel Brooks.
Starring Susan Sarandon? Well, featuring Susan Sarandon.
And everybody. Malcolm McDowell and Andy McDowell in the same scene.
My mind is blown.
They make a big deal out of that in the movie.
I know.
But I love The Player. But like Altman's, what are you going to remake Nashville? No, you might. I mean, yeah, like there was a TV series called Nashville, but it had nothing to do with that movie.
Yeah, and I think that Nashville is to Robert Altman the same way that like Blazing Saddles is to Mel Brooks, where it's like it is so very much tied to the creator.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say like Nashville is kind of, I would say many. I was just kind of calling it back to Mel Brooks, but like it's that type of situation. I mean, yeah. So you're not going to remake The Long Goodbye. You are going to readapt The Long Goodbye, and you're going to readapt Marlow. And I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to see if you've got some great filmmakers out there, and Rian Johnson nailed noir with Brick.
Yeah.
I can't think of another recent, like really solid example of contemporary noir.
Yeah.
Other than Brick.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, we talked about Blade Runner before. Blade Runner 2049 isn't really as noir. It's the noir light. Yes. Yeah. No, the original. No, I mean, Blade Runner, the OG is very much noir in that futuristic context. I mean, like you're saying with Rian Johnson and Brick, that is at the time, contemporary, like, I don't know how old he was supposed to be, but like he's in high school. High school version of high school noir, Yeah. So I mean, I don't quite know. Would you try to reinvent noir for the 21st century? Would you just be faithful and keep it set in the early 1950s and do really like stylistic period, like a good, like an LA Confidential type? Oh, I'll tell you. Well, did you see Motherless Brooklyn? Not yet. It's very good. Edward Norton, excellent. I am not drawn to, 1950s like mob kind of noir-y movies so much, but that one did it for me. I was really captivated by it. It was very good. Awesome. I'm going to check that out as soon as I can. It just kind of like flew by and didn't really catch many people's attention, but I don't know. I found it really enjoyable, and I'm not into that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the like 40s and 50s noir piece, it got a little tired for me. And when you have a character like Philip Marlowe, Robert Altman showed what you can do with this character in a different era. And I think that's pretty fascinating. I mean, so also, is there anything? Oh, go ahead. Oh, no, saying also just like having it not be like a cleaned up private eye, it's somebody who he might even say like, fuck the pigs when talking about the cops. Like and that's kind of where I was going before with Altman's purpose in casting is by saying like, look, you might think of this character as this, but this character is much more in real life. This character would be much more this guy who I'm showing you. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. A guy who has got like a kind of crappy apartment. I don't know. The Philip Marlowe of 1973 is not a stiff. And maybe I feel like that's where the necktie comes in, is because it's kind of like it's his one. It's just like, hey, if I do this, that's enough. Well, yeah, he's on the clock. I'm professional. Like, as soon as he puts it on, he's doing his job, and he keeps it on the entire time. So, John, I'm curious. Let's say you were just like in charge of recasting, and regardless of when it was being set, Okay.
Who do you see? Who do you see as the modern day Marlowe?
Who I see as the modern day Marlowe, this is good. Well,
Other
first
than
of
Oscar
all,
Isaac.
it wouldn't be Oscar Isaac. So, by the way, who doesn't love Oscar Isaac? I am so excited for Dune.
I might even try to read that book.
Oh, good
before
luck.
the movie because
So
I got excited.
I don't know if we've talked about him a lot on this podcast before, but just talking about directors, clearly the person who rules over the private eye genre right now is Shane Black. And what he did with The Nice Guys is awesome. And I feel like The Nice Guys, I know we talked about The Nice Guys not on the podcast a bunch of times, but I think that that's a really fun private eye 1970s movie that where like Philip Marlowe would kind of be like if you saw Elliot Gould in 1973 walking in the background of The Nice Guys, it'd be like, that makes sense. Like they exist in the same world together, and they're just he just didn't get that job. They got that job. And the one actor that I thought of immediately as being somebody who could essentially be the now version of 1973 Elliot Gould is Ben Sinclair. Are you familiar with Ben Sinclair? Ben Sinclair is by the way, it sounds like I'm saying Benson Claire. No, it's Ben, as in Benjamin Sinclair. He does the show High Maintenance.
Yeah. Yes.
He's awesome. And I really love that. I mean, High Maintenance is his show, but since it has started, he has shown more and more of what he is capable of as an actor and a director. And yes, his character on High Maintenance is this weed dealer, stoner guy, but he does have this intelligence to him. He knows things about the world, and he
listens. He's a listener.
On that show, he is a collector of all these personalities that he encounters. And when that show gets into more of his personal life, you get to see more of who he really is. And I think that the way that Ben plays that role reminds me a lot of how Elliot Gould plays Marlowe. And not to say that he is a detective on his show at all, but like I could see him doing what Elliot Gould does.
Very much the Elliot Gould Marlowe.
So I had a few other remake actor and director pairings that I thought would be really good. So that would be my Ben Sinclair and Shane Black pairing, just because I trust Shane Black. He finds the humor in things in the way that like this movie had a lot of funny moments in a movie that isn't a funny movie. And another pairing that we kind of talked about, well, we talked about one half of this, but I know that Rian Johnson has already done a noir movie, and he kind of goes like, all right, check, done that, on to the next genre. But Rian Johnson with Lakeith Stanfield would be a really cool.
Oh.
How good would Lakeith Stanfield be as a Marlowe?
Oh, he'd be fantastic.
He'd be so good. And I know that, they work together, Knives Out, and he's great. The other pairing, the one other pairing that I have, and I know you're going to be excited about at least half of this. Director, Greta Gerwig, Marlowe, Laurie Metcalf. How amazing.
I'm excited about both halves, though. I swear you were going to go like Saoirse Ronan.
Saoirse Ronan? No. Laurie Metcalf.
Oh my God, Laurie Metcalf as
How
Marlowe.
Excited would you be to see Laurie Metcalf playing a burnt out private eye?
I can picture it. I can close my eyes and picture it. She's so good, and the material would just suit her so well.
Yeah. So. And the performance that she does have in Lady Bird, like, was just like, oh, of course it would be with Greta Gerwig, who is showing that she can bounce from genre to genre and isn't staying pigeonholed in the New York indie movie type of
I mean, and speaking of Greta Gerwig as a filmmaker, it actually makes me think of an actor who I didn't have on my list, but Bob Odenkirk.
I knew you were going to say
as
Bob
Marlow.
Odenkirk. My Little Women. My Little Women.
My Little Women. Oh, you've grown.
My Little Women. So I know, and there I am sitting.
Would be great.
I swear to God, I'm like the only one in the theater who was like, "Oh my God, holy shit, it's Bob Odenkirk."
Another like private eye noir-y, it's not a movie, but a TV series that I want to mention really quick is Bored to Death. The Jason Schwartzman show with Zach Galifianakis and Ted Danson. That was a great show. It was. I
always meant to go back to it. I think I watched like the first season, and then I didn't have HBO when the second season came on. So
what's interesting about that show is it's about a novelist who had one successful novel, who is stuck in, with writer's block for his next novel, and starts advertising himself on Craigslist, because that was a thing at the time, as an unlicensed private detective for hire. And each episode is a different case, but he's also trying to put his life together and figure out what he's going to do with his life and his relationships. And Jason Schwartzman, I've always been such a huge fan of, and he's so good. But that is an interesting way to take like a Philip Marlowe type of thing and turn it on its side a little bit, where it's like, this is somebody who, let's say for the sake of argument, that like Schwartzman's character is a big fan of Philip Marlowe, noir pulpy novels, and is basing his persona off of that. So that's what that show did essentially. I don't know if they called out a specific fictional private detective he was modeling himself off of.
I don't think. I mean, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I don't know. You know who I was thinking I wouldn't mind seeing play Marlowe, or play like a Marlowe type character, and just more in the traditional casting vein, Viggo Mortensen.
Really?
You know what I'm thinking? So I'm thinking of a couple of things. And first, I think back to A History of Violence, which is a movie that I'm not crazy about the movie, but I thought he was fantastic in it. And I think about him in Green Book. And whereas I mean, Green Book, I know.
Say what you will. Anyway.
No. I don't necessarily love the movie, but I saw a Viggo Mortensen in that I had not seen before. And I was like, there is potential with this Viggo Mortensen. Not that there wasn't with the Aragorn version, the Viggo Mortensen of
I did not love him in A History of Violence. I remembered seeing it one time when it first came out, so maybe I need to revisit it. Was he also in Eastern Promises?
Yes, which I haven't seen.
Which I didn't love him in either. I don't know. I think that I just had this view of who Viggo Mortensen was, Lord of the Rings aside, and it's essentially like those movies and Green Book for me. And I'm just kind of like, all right.
I mean, I watched Green Book on a plane, and I feel like I wouldn't dislike it as much if it wasn't an Academy Award winner. If it was just like Green Book was no better a film than School Ties, and School Ties was not nominated for a single Academy Award.
School Ties, greatest movie of our generation.
I'm just kind of like, movies movies that might fall under the same umbrella. But I enjoyed Viggo, and I saw it on a plane, so who knows? But I liked Viggo Mortensen in it, and
it was an interesting choice.
Yeah,
how they got to him would be interesting to find out. But anyway,
I mean, I guess I don't care enough about the movie to find out. I was two talented actors, and they were doing whatever. We're not here to talk about Green Book.
No,
but I just have one. I have just one thing to add,
please,
about The Long Goodbye, and that is, I find it interesting that this movie comes out within 2 years, within maybe a year and a half of Chinatown.
Oh, right, Chinatown.
I thought there was a lot in this that reminded me of Chinatown.
Uh-huh.
There was just, and I can't like yes, Los Angeles, but I don't know. There was like a vibe to it that really made me think of Chinatown so much to say that I'm like, is he ripping off Chinatown? And then I was like, no, this came out before Chinatown.
Right. Huh.
So it's interesting. I'd be interested, and it's a shame. I watched Chinatown again not too long ago, and I'm not exactly ready to go back to it quite yet. But I guess there was just something about a tone to it. Maybe Chinatown does have that very 70s vibe, even though it's set in the 40s.
Right. Yeah.
Or early 50s or whatever. But yeah, just throwing that out there.
Sure. No, very interesting. Did you have any other ideas about bringing back the Long Goodbye?
I mean, I was thinking kind of like you were thinking, like, what if you do what if you try to build this character into like your next, I don't know, like a James Bond or a Jack Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it essentially already has been. It's just been on hold for a long time.
But what if you bring it back and maybe not try to do something like Altman did with it, but maybe just try to do like detective noir really well.
Yeah.
And maybe just try to like do it like a faithful adaptation, and big picture, like I think an anthology series could be cool. I think an anthology series where you end up having you've got like maybe some Dashiell Hammett characters crossing paths with some Raymond Chandler characters, and you have like a noir
Avengers.
Noir verse. Yes. The Noir Avengers, a lot of cigarettes being smoked.
Oh my God. Everyone's just like blowing the smoke out of their face. So
Avengers headquarters, 2 trucks pull up. One of them is full of cigarettes, the other whiskey.
Yeah. So I don't know. I had something and then I lost it, but it's pretty interesting. We do have the Marlow character, and I think that because there were only a certain number of books written for that character, unlike, Ian Fleming wrote way more, and of course it's kind of going beyond those books. It's just not as robust of a character storyline, but I don't know. I think that there's a lot that can be done. It's a beloved character. It would be cool to see whether it's this movie or one of the other Marlowe movies kind of come back again.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to see one set present day, just because I think that it gets complicated once you have technology. But I think that doing it in the 70s is perfect. One thing I'm also wondering, going back to Shane Black a little bit, I wasn't able to find it anywhere, but The Long Kiss Goodnight, is that a reference to The Long Goodbye?
Oh, almost definitely.
Well,
almost.
I looked it up. I couldn't find anything saying that, but it's just like, why else would you call it that?
Yeah. I mean, it's Farewell, My Lovely. And like, I'm sure if you go through your noir titles, I mean, Long Kiss Goodnight, it's just.
That's right. What I was also going to say is that, like, talking about detective anthologies, we do have True Detective, of course. And then somebody who was greatly impacted by the film The Long Goodbye and then subsequently the novel was Michael Connelly, who wrote who created the character of Harry Bosch, which has the Amazon series. I think the latest season just came out. Dan, have you ever watched Bosch?
I've not watched it. It's been recommended to me, and I do like Titus Welliver. So
Titus
who
Welliver's
plays
great.
Bosch.
The first few seasons are really strong. I kind of fell off a little bit, but I'm curious to see if the new season's strong. But it is it's a very Marlowe-y character. I mean, he is a cop, he is a detective, but he's pretty, I don't know, grizzled and over it, and he goes outside of the, of the law a little bit when he needs to do what he needs to do.
He would have been, man, who would have been a good Marlowe? And actually now I would cast him more as who is the writer in Long Goodbye as Wade. Our friend Tom Berenger from Major League. Tom Berenger, and I'm pretty sure Tom Berenger did a couple of like detective movies. Like I want to say he did one with Ridley Scott called Someone Who'll Watch Over Me. I've never seen it, but I don't know. I might have to check that one. I did one in the early 90s called Shattered. Okay. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen that, but yeah, Tom Berenger.
Tom Berenger, get him in there.
Why not?
I mean, we could go all day talking about detective anthologies and movies and stuff like that.
I would be more than happy to see a good old school detective, like just a faithful, like, hey, we're going to do 1950s, but we're going to do it real, like Mad Men.
Oh, I mean, you should watch Motherless Brooklyn. That's my recommendation.
Yes. Okay.
Ed Norton did a great job. It's really engaging. The performance, Bobby Cannavale's in it, Alec Baldwin is in it. There's just a lot of really great performances. What?
Well, I think I think New York City will not give you a permit to film unless you cast Bobby Cannavale. I'm pretty sure if you're filming within the 5 boroughs, he's got to be in it, and your film or television series will be better for it. He's great.
Absolutely.
Did you watch Vinyl?
I was just going to ask you if you watched. I did watch Vinyl. It's great.
I did not watch the entirety of this. Is there only one season?
I think so.
Is that true? I think I watched oh wait, maybe I did. Did I watch the entire? Wait, I watched.
I don't think it was that long.
Maybe I did watch the entire first season.
It was kind of jarring to see him as this, like, was he like a record producer or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, he's a record label exec. Yeah.
It was kind of weird seeing him as being like the main character. I love seeing him as, a secondary character. I think that's when he's at his strongest. So I don't know. I don't think that I really bought him as like the lead of the show, but it was a fun show. It was very bizarre. At
a certain point, I feel like I was watching an episode and there was just so much cocaine going on that I was just like,
yeah,
I don't want to watch this.
Yeah. So I don't know. Vinyl. Sure. It's fun. It's weird.
Bobby Cannavale, though.
Olivia Wilde. She's great. Mick Jagger's son is in it. He's good.
Wasn't Mick Jagger producer?
And Martin Scorsese was involved. I think at least with the pilot.
Well, of course,
I think that was the draw.
If the Rolling Stones, if any of the Rolling Stones are involved, Martin Scorsese is not far behind.
Yeah.
I think he's the one who did their bit for the stay-at-home concert, because the Rolling Stones were on that, and it was funny because they had 4. There were like 4. And it was Mick's was the first one on, and it was like Keith's cam, Ronnie's cam, and Mick's was the only one on at first. And he started doing "You Can't Always Get What You Want," and I was like, are they each going to come in at a specific point, or are like their grandkids trying to figure out like to get their webcams going, or like what is? And it turned out to be the former, where like they each kind of came in at their own part, and it was playing. Charlie Watts was not. Charlie Watts was sitting there with drumsticks and a couple of like kit cases, and he was just like playing in the air. Ronnie Wood was playing as though he was doing an arena show.
Oh my God.
He was like jumping up and out. I was trying to explain to Chloe, saying like why she should not be whining and saying, "Is it over yet?" I was like, it's the Rolling Stones. So anyway.
So today, my daughter, Maggie, had to, she really wanted to watch Baby Beluga on YouTube, but she had to wait for me to first watch a breakdown of all of the different portrayals of Philip Marlowe. And I just had to tell her, she was very patient, all things considered. But there were a couple times when I said, this one's for me, the next one is for you, I promise. So
this one's for me.
I was like, it's almost over, which was a lie. And I was like, we're going to watch this really quick. And then the rest of TV for today is you, I promise. So that's how we had to navigate that. We very rarely put things on the TV that aren't like kids stuff, but I was like, she can sit through, a 5-minute Philip Marlowe breakdown.
When they got to Elliot Gould, was she like, what?
Yeah, it's just like, why does that guy look like all of our like old family photos?
Looks like Uncle Joe circa 1968. All right.
So Dan, why don't we talk about what we're going to do for our next episode?
All right.
No one's going to see this coming unless you read the description of the episode.
From out of left field comes 1987's Ishtar.
Ishtar. We're doing it, baby.
We're going there.
Okay.
Going there.
Dan, I have to say, we're like 60 episodes into this podcast. I love that like there's a chunk of 4 that is seconds. Major League, The Long Goodbye, Ishtar. What? I love it.
Yet they're kind of all connecting for me. So, well, I shouldn't say they're not kind of all connecting for me, but it's interesting that Long Goodbye and Ishtar came up almost concurrently.
I added them to our list at the same time. So there you go.
Yes. Anyway, next episode, we'll talk more about all of the connections I'm making between The Long Goodbye and Ishtar.
Dustin Hoffman. Was it Warren Beatty?
Dustin Hoffman, Warren Beatty, written and directed by Elaine May, starring Isabella Gianni, Warren Beatty's girlfriend of 1987.
Du jour.
Charles Grodin pops up.
Oh, awesome. Excited.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get our Grodon.
Oh, boy.
So Ishtar, I'm excited, John. It's going to be fun.
And I think that we're going to be focusing on the director's cut because that's what we've got available to us. So if anyone is looking to follow along, if you have the option between the theatrical release and the director's cut, go for the director's cut.
Or if you watch the theatrical version, we're interested to, we could compare contrast.
Yeah, well, also write to us, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com. If you are an Ishtar head and have something you want to add, if you have anything you want to say about The Long Goodbye, Seconds, Major League, or any other movie that we've talked about, hit us up. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hope everyone is staying safe, keeping their distance. And with that, we say, good journey. And be well.
Good journey and be well.
And
That's
good
right.
journey.